Back. What we're going to be making today is we're going to be making pumpkin French toast bake. And what we're going to be using is, a couple of days ago, we made some homemade dinner rolls. And so we have 8 of them left, and they are really dense. So we're going to make a pumpkin French toast bake out of it. So always utilizing anything that we have left over, repurposing it so that it will get eaten and we have no food loss cost. So what we're going to start off with is we are going to crack 6 eggs into a mixing bowl. And what we're going to add into that is 1 tablespoon of sugar, white sugar. We're going to add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And we're going to add 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. You could also use a 1/4 of clove, but I don't really care for cloves that much, so I tend to leave them out when I find a recipe calls for them. And what you're going to do is mix that all together. While you're mixing stuff together, you always want to preheat your oven. So I just went ahead and preheated my oven to 350 degrees because it'll only take a few minutes here to whisk in the rest of our ingredients. Okay. What we're going to add to this is we're going to add 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin mix. And we're going to mix this all together. You could also use a hand blender if you wanted to, or if you wanted to use the KitchenAid. Since there's only a few ingredients that we're doing here, and everything's relatively soft, I'm just using a fork. But you could also use a whisk too. Okay. So we just wanted to make sure that our eggs are nice and beaten into the pumpkin mix. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and sit this aside for a couple minutes, and we are going to start cutting up our bread. Okay, so I have my bread on my cutting board, and let's talk about the different types of bread that you could use. You definitely don't want to use a sliced white bread like a normal sandwich bread. You want to use something that's thicker and denser, so I would suggest using any leftover. You could do a leftover like Italian bread, a French baguette. You could buy a loaf of Texas toast, just anything that is kind of dense. And what we're going to do is we want to cut it into 1-inch cubes. So I'm just going to go ahead and hold it lengthwise, cut it right down the middle. Get 2 halves. You always want to put the flat side down of whatever you're cutting. And we want 1-inch cubes. So I'm basically just going to cut the rolls in half. And then just flip it around. So here you can see they're a little bit bigger than a 1-inch cube, but I wasn't going to sit there and dissect the whole bread. So what you want to do is go ahead and finish off your other piece. Alright, so now that we have all of our bread cut, we want to go ahead and add it into a square dish, and you either want to butter it or you want to use cooking spray. I have a butter cooking spray, and I love using the throwaway pans, especially for something like this where we're going to be adding a lot of sugar. You know, things could stick. I don't tend to have a lot of Pyrex sets, so I tend to use a lot of throwaway containers, so that way if I bring it somewhere, you know, I'm not chasing that person down, you know, 2 weeks later trying to get my pans or my Tupperware. So you're going to go ahead and add the bread mixture, all of it, to the pan. If there's any big pieces that you see, you can just take them and just rip them in half. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. This is just how I suggest, and then you kind of tweak your own recipe from there. Okay. So now we have our container full of this cubed up bread. And what we're going to take is we're taking our pumpkin mixture that has the sugar and the nutmeg and everything. Give it one more little mix here. And then what we're going to do is just pour it right on top. Alrighty. And now for the fun part. You can either use your hands or use a fork, and we're just going to kind of move it around so that way it coats the bread. But you don't want to smush it between your fingers and the bread. You just kind of want to coat it, because as it cooks, it'll also drip down onto the piece underneath. And not every single piece has to be coated 100%. That's the good thing about a French bake. Alright, so now that this is all kind of mixed together, what we're going to do is now set this aside, and we're going to make a little crumb topping for the top. So in a bowl, what we're going to do is we're going to take our 1/3 cup brown sugar, our 2 teaspoons of flour, our 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and our 1 tablespoon of butter. And what you want to do is you just kind of want to use the back of the fork to kind of go ahead and mix everything, like almost like if you're going to make a pie dough. So you just want to incorporate that. You always want to make sure your butter is soft, but definitely don't melt it. So what I do is I usually start measuring out my ingredients, and I take the butter out of the fridge. That's where we keep our butter. So that way when I'm ready to use it, that it is nice and pliable. Okay. Not every single piece has to be completely smushed in, but you're just looking for the majority of it. So that way you can kind of see there's like crumble pieces. And then we'll bring our mixture back in, and we're just going to take, and we're just going to sprinkle it over the top. If you want, you can kind of, it all depends on how much you want. You can do a little bit more, you can do a little bit less, but this should be plenty to cover this. There you go. Like I said, we're going to put this in the oven at 350 degrees and bake it for about 35 minutes.